Hello and welcome to another episode of the American Soccer Analysis Show. I am your host, Kieran, and today I'm joined, as always, by the same dynamic duo, Harrison High Life Crow and Benjamin Benito Suarez Bellman. Harrison, will Jordan Morris start for Maurizio Pochettino's U.S. men's national team?
I mean, at some time, like everybody gets injured, right? So
Probably not.
there's just like that cycle to where it's like, do we have any wingers left? Nope. Go to Jordan Morris, and like he plays, scores a goal, or like gets like an assist, and then everybody's like, why are we using Jordan Morris? We have these young players in Europe, and then like Jordan Morris like receives all this online hate, and then he gets left in MLS, and then he'll score 20 goals or 15 goals for MLS, and yeah, it'll be fun. It'll be
There was
fun.
there was a fun conversation in the ASA patron Discord about Jordan Morris this week, which I thought was fun. Ben, when will Georgi Mihailovic get his flowers? Is he the prince that was promised?
I mean, he's great, but
Probably,
I
probably
don't,
not.
I don't have my hopes high for that one.
Well, Reggie Cannon, I talked smack and said he sucks, and then he scored a left-footed screamer against TFC. So, maybe we don't know. Maybe we don't know. But what we do know here at ASA is we know how to run some models. We know how to run some models. And the latest edition of the playoff probability model is out. And actually, Maddie made a prediction model where you can change the players available. So if you say have the inside track that Lionel Messi is going to get injured or something, you can see what's going to happen to Miami down the stretch. And if you want to use this app, the only way to get your hands on it is become a patron, a Patreon subscriber. There's one tier, it's $5 a month, and it gets you into the patron only Discord where people are playing around with it. It's there for MLS, it's there for NWSL. It may at some point be there for USL. If you want to get real weird, that's the place to do it. But the latest playoff simulation numbers came out, and some interesting numbers in here. Harrison, who stands out to you as surprising in this list?
Well, I think that when we were talking about it initially, I think the team that I kind of was like, oh, you know what? I might take that is Vancouver and RSL. They kind of sitting there with, I mean, Vancouver's not even 100% to make the playoffs, although it seems pretty clear cut at this point. Nobody in the West is going to catch anybody else sitting in a playoff spot right now. Even Portland seems pretty secure. But like surprisingly, like Vancouver, 2%, RSL 3%. I mean, that seems kind of high. So I don't know. I think that's kind of a crazy risk, kind of fun, crazy risk.
Yeah, I think they fall into the same bucket with like a whole bunch of other teams. Colorado are in a similar bucket to this. Orlando, Charlotte are another one where like they have an extremely high probability to avoid the play-in games. Like they're
Mhm.
almost certain to avoid the play-in games. And then because they're almost certain to avoid the play-in games, they have a quite high to advance probability to the second round. And there's just a whole mess of teams between like 40 and 60% to advance to the second round. And there's not a lot of people outside of that that are realistically going to make the playoffs. Uh, Ben, how are you feeling as a Rapido fan? Because these odds, I think, are maybe shortchanging you a little bit.
Yeah, this was a real interesting one. So for the viewers at home, well, listeners, not viewers, I'm viewing. Rapids are at to win the whole shebang. They are at 0.013% according to these simulations, which I do think is a little low. And I played around with this over the past week or so, and I'm like, well, why would the model have us down this low? And in the back of my head, I'm like, I know why it is. It's because of lack of like ironically, because this has been one of our best offensive years, but it's lack of really a reliable offensive engine right now. We've got Georgie, we've got Navahu, but we don't really have much else. And the Cabral injury has been really killer there because he created so much danger through where he received the ball and was able to lay it off. So when you put him back into the lineup, it goes from zero point zero 0.01 to zero point zero 0.02. If you were to upgrade Cabral or upgrade the whoever happens to be lining up across from him to one of the better wings in the league, that probability goes up to 0.04, zero point zero 0.05. So this is actually, I think, a thing where the model's like, you've been doing good as a team, but you don't have the talent to put you over the edge. You don't have the people who can generate buckets of G plus in a single game to push you over. And I think that's probably why we're getting dinged in these simulations.
Yeah, and I think one of the interesting things to be cognizant of is the way this model works is it's a combination of the expected goals models and the G plus models. And what we see is that there are teams that the expected goals models like, but the G plus models don't like. And there are teams that are the vice versa of that. And then there are teams like Toronto who are like a 50-50 shot to make the playoffs, but have zero chance to win the title in the 10,000 simulations or whatever. They won the title zero times. I think actually that's maybe an underplayed aspect of this is the East playoff race is really fun. Even if we put the title probabilities aside, between DC, Atlanta, Toronto, Chicago, Montreal, New England, who are extreme outsiders, um, and the Union, you have like a real logjam to both get into the back end of the playoffs and to avoid the play-in games. Like we talked about Nashville the last pod, and I was like, they're dead and buried. They're dead last in the league, and then they rip off a win streak, and now they're outsiders for sure. But like they don't have very
Well,
many
three
points to
points,
make up.
3 points away, right? Like I mean, especially when you start looking at who's ahead of them and like Montreal, like
Toronto,
Toronto.
like
Come on, like that doesn't feel insurmountable, right? Philadelphia has been stumbling. I know that they've been a little bit weak in depth, but I mean, and Nashville's interesting, but like look up ahead. I mean, I think you pointed this out when we were talking on the side is Houston, right? Houston's is sitting seventh in our probability right now, and I think that that's like that's a that's a gimme, right?
yeah, I think. I mean, we should
And I
probably
say a
talk.
gimme, I mean like that draws your eyes. Like that's a like you got a $2 bet, $1 bet to be like, oh yeah, holy crap, Houston, absolutely, let's throw it down like that
We
far out.
Yeah, I mean, we should probably talk about the top like eight teams here, and I say eight explicitly so we don't have to talk about Seattle. But we the top eight is really weird because on the face of it, Miami are a team who don't have a good expected goal difference. Like they're basically zero for the season, but the simulation model loves Miami. It has them as the second best team in the league behind Cincinnati. And part of that is that they will have a very easy first round game. If we look at probabilities to advance to the second round, they have the second highest at 66%. That's huge. Like just having the leeway to not have to play anyone good in the first round, where like they're going to play Atlanta or DC or Toronto or Montreal or Nashville. Like who cares? Now, what's interesting is that G plus quite likes Miami much more than expected goals does. And a lot of that is because like they have quite good progression metrics. And G plus doesn't do a great job of seeing why they stink defensively, which is part of why their expected goal difference isn't very good. But I'm surprised that our models like them this much in terms of where they are. But I think there's also a to pull back the technological curtain, like the model takes into account what players are going to play. So you can set the 11 you think is going to play, and that changes things. And like you can do this with Messi playing for Miami and with him not playing for Miami, and it's a huge difference. Um, I think maybe the more interesting side of things, because we know in the East that Cincinnati and Miami and Columbus are kind of the three best teams, and maybe Red Bulls are frisky because they're so good defensively. Maybe NYCFC are frisky. They drew Miami this weekend. I think the more interesting side of things is, like you said, with Houston, is the West, where in the Western Conference, you have the LA Galaxy, you have LAFC, and you have Houston, and you have Seattle, who are all very, very solid teams. Very solid teams. And the model really likes the Galaxy. It puts them almost twice as likely as anybody else to make the final. They're the most likely team in MLS to make the final, probably because they don't have to play Cincinnati, Miami, Columbus. But Ben, like, do you agree with that? Do you think the Galaxy are the presumptive favorites in the West? Is there something with LAFC that's maybe not getting picked up by the model here? Anybody else in the West?
I am not sure about this one because I think like I'm really unsure about this because right now you'd look at LA Galaxy and LAFC and sort of think of them as like polar opposite teams. Like one is a high gunning offense, cannot be stopped, but leaks goals constantly. Whereas LAFC, they've had their sort of offensive runs, but they work on pressure and on game states, to get those leads. They're not trying to possess the ball or be on the ball or, put the ball into zone 14 all of the time. They're happy to sit back and just burn you when you're completely empty defensively. So I don't know how the model would pick those apart because if I'm going on recency bias, this makes perfect sense. Like I do think the Galaxy are better than LAFC right now. But is that the simulations being like, well, they haven't scored many goals in the past 5 matches on LAFC side. So are they bringing that down? Like I'm curious if there's recency bias in how the models are written. And if, like, let's say LAFC gets it together over these next 4 games or 3 games, however they have many left, before playoffs actually start, if that bump in form would actually reflect in their odds. Because I bet it probably would.
Harrison, how are you feeling about the West as a Seattleian?
No, I kind of think Ben kind of nailed it because the recency bias is a really good question with
So
how well.
that is, I believe, there is like a sliding scale of how much games are weighted. Like the first game of the season is weighted less than last week's game, I believe.
Yeah, and again, like LAFC, really tough stretch of games, right? And I don't mean necessarily a tough stretch of games that, of opponents, right? They lost to Dallas, they drew against Austin, then they had the LA, what are they calling it? The
El Trafico.
El Trafico. There, I don't know why I paused on that. It was a weird one to get stuck on. But like you drew against Houston, you lost against Houston, and then the only team that of any notoriety that you beat in the last month and a half is Seattle, which you beat like 3 times to a pulp. So if you get LA or if you get Seattle, yeah, I'm sure LA is feeling really good. You get anybody else. Like honestly, right now, if I'm LAFC, I'm kind of nervous going into the season, into the second half of the season because it's it's kind of scary, man. LA Galaxy's been so good. They're so good attacking. I think, even their defense is probably unfairly rated a little bit. Um,
Mm,
you think
they have
no?
they have the third highest XG against in the
You're
entire
absolutely
league.
right, but it's gotten better over the course of the season. No?
Probably,
I
probably.
feel
Matt Doyle had a
I'd have
really good
go ahead.
Matt Doyle had a good tweet showing like the tactical adjustments Greg Vanney made in El Trafico about what they did with their fullbacks to manage transitions better. Um, I would say it's probably better, but I don't think it's that much better.
Okay, that's fair. I think in general, yeah, you have, G plus and XG both hate their defense. And I get that, right? I get that. The other side of it though is they are making, fine tunements and they can obviously beat the brakes off of anybody. Gabriel Peck is just absolutely lights out right
They're
now.
they're They are, I believe, the first team in MLS history to have four players score
Hmm.
10 goals in a
Yeah.
season.
I,
In
I
Peck, Jovic, Paintsill, and who am I forgetting? Ricky Puig.
Pooch.
Yeah, Puig. The Puig Meister.
well,
Um, well, so
Bruges is
listen,
so great, right? Like
yeah.
Bruges is like an X factor in and of himself, right?
Hmm.
Forget about all these other weapons that they have. Ricky Puig can just rip you apart.
Yeah, and it's like defense wins championships, but I think we're about to test that with scoring 4 goals a game wins you championships because I think that is also true. I think that might also be true.
I mean,
So
wouldn't that
there,
be really interesting after we have this really finite tactical battle between Columbus and LAFC over the last like 18 months, and then the next game is just LA Galaxy
the
just
Galaxy
scoring
just say,
like
"Woo!"
12 goals and giving up 13? Like,
So I think there's a couple of really interesting sidebars there. First off, apparently Zach Lowe talked about this for the NBA, who's like big NBA podcaster guy. He talked about how when he was first at Grantland, he like wrote this piece showing that like having a better defense relative to the rest of the league is more important for playoff success. But then he had been like redoing the research recently, and it's flipped that actually in the NBA now having a better offense matters a little bit more. There's like a lower there's a floor to how bad your defense can be that you can be successful. But like if you have to choose between the first overall offense and the first overall defense, and the other one is like the 10th best in the league or something like that, now having the better offense is a little bit better. And I would be curious to see in MLS in the playoffs if there's anything there to that in terms of signal. In terms of LA and LAFC or the Galaxy and LAFC, I think what it mostly comes down to is seeding. Because if we look at the table, it's extremely unlikely the Galaxy get caught for number one, which means their first round, they're almost certainly going to play Portland or Minnesota or Dallas, one of the bad, like clearly not as good as everybody else teams. So their round two probability is quite high. It's not that much higher than NFC, but it's quite high. Where I think it really matters is if you look at the semi probability, is that's where the difference really pops off because if they win their first game, instead of playing LAFC, I imagine the model projects that they're going to beat Colorado. Instead of playing LAFC in the next round or Houston, they're going to play like Seattle or RSL or something instead of getting Houston. Um, or maybe it actually thinks that they are going to play Houston, who are not super loved by XGD, and they're going to avoid the Sounders. But my guess is that there's some like tomfoolery of who they end up with in the second round compared to LAFC, and that's where a lot of that projection comes up. Whereas, like in the East, if we look at Cincinnati, Miami, their two advance probabilities are basically the same the whole way through, except for the first round, because Cincinnati will have the easiest first round game, or depending on how it goes. But then it's like all the second round games are hard. Whether you play New York, whether you play the other New York, whether you like, if you get Columbus, like they're all brutal second round games. So I'd imagine there is some shuffling of matches there. Any other like good takes? Any other final thoughts on the playoff simulations? Anybody stand out to you? Anybody you think like this is worth a punt? You think is like outside favorite here?
maybe Houston.
Yeah, I was literally thinking that. I'm like, Houston is flying under the radar, but with their style of playing, with the talent they have available, they can just pop up out of nowhere. And the model seems to agree with that.
I mean, you
Yeah,
just got
they're
done saying like they're talking about how important defense is, right? I mean, if we're going to talk about the opposite of what LA Galaxy is, it's really it's Houston, right?
well, and Steve Clark is like penalty man, right? Like he has an excellent record in
Wait,
terms of
wait, 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 wait. We're gonna give Steve Clark, but like John McCarthy, LA got
no,
named.
no, for sure, for sure. I that's
Good, it's
yeah,
good.
but
Make fun of my
they're
defensive stuff.
sorry, picking LAFC is not exactly, or picking the Galaxy to win the West is not exactly an outside favorite here. I almost said LAFC. I mixed up
I mean,
my
that's the player you can be forgiven to
yeah.
use that
Yeah,
for.
that's fair. My outside favorite is the Red Bull. I don't know what it is. I can't quit this team. They have not won once in their last 5 games.
You can't draw your way
And
to a championship.
but even without Forsberg and with the team just like being kind of a mess all the time, they just keep chugging away with really solid XG games. And like, I have to fundamentally believe as a man that the math will come home for them. And
But
so
like, talk through like okay, defense, yes, I'm totally with you. Talk through how they beat one of these teams from an attacking perspective. I'm
they
just curious
they win a low scoring game with a set piece and they
with a
don't
set piece.
concede.
Okay,
And they
all
don't
right,
concede.
fair
And
enough.
like maybe like I don't know, maybe Forsberg scores or Lewis Morgan goes off. Like they're one of the higher XG4 teams in the East, less than a lot of the teams in the West. But defensively, they're cracked. I think they're the second best defense in the whole league. So yeah, they're fourth best defense in the whole league. Like they're there. So we'll see. Like I don't think they're gonna blow anybody out, but like survive the first round against Orlando or Charlotte or whoever you get, and then after that it's all single elimination. Like nil, nick a set piece, win in a shootout is a very viable strategy, I think. So
Definitely a tournament strategy, right?
yes, yeah. Ben, who's your outside shot?
I said Houston with Harrison.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's all good. And yeah,
Alrighty.
Yeah.
Well, the
Do you have anything different? Like I didn't really cover a lot with Houston. Do you have anything specific about Houston that pokes out at
it's
you?
good. It's gonna go through their central midfield. If they can turn these decent underlying numbers into a championship, it's because Ache and Bossy just clicked for a month and a half, and it was fire, and it could totally happen. So that's my take.
Ibrahim Aliyu. Uh, we'll see. I think they're gonna try. I think they have the same problem as the Red Bulls without the like structural ways to create good chances. That's my like Houston thing. But I think we'll see. I'm curious. The other totally changing tack. The other thing that kind of came out this week was the 22 under 22 ballots went in, and I think kind of just to talk about it generally before we get into the nitty gritty, we each kind of picked a player or in some cases a group of players because Harrison's a cheater. Uh, I think the coolest thing, and I think Andrew Weeby tweeted this today, was like it's actually so hard to pick your 22 under 22 list now because there's so many under 22 players who are actually contributing and playing real minutes and are really good. Whereas like 3, 4, 5 years ago, the 22 under 22 lists were like Jaquil Marshall Ruddy was like top 10 on that list 3 years in a row with like 200 MLS minutes. And now like there's 18-year-olds with 2,000 minutes who won't get a vote. And I think that's really, really cool. So we each picked a player or a group of players, like I mentioned, and we just wanted to like shout them out, talk about their data. We're not going to go through a full list. There's some really cool ballots out there. Ben, why don't we start with you? Who was your 22 under 22 guy?
So my guy is someone that came on my radar during preview season, and that's LAFC's David Martinez. And
Ooh.
I'm picking him because I think he needs to be playing more. And I know this was just featured on Extra Time, but the guys there are right. If you go into the numbers on ASA, and he's played 311 minutes thus far in 2024 for LAFC in regular season play. In those minutes, and yes, it's a small sample size, he is the third most effective winger in the league. And yes, he's doing a lot of subs, so that's juicing his numbers. Yes, it's a small sample size. But you look at his what he's done for the league and how he's like earned those points. You look at his highlights for Venezuela and what he's good at, and they all match up. He's lighting it up on dribbling. Oh boy, is he lighting it up on dribbling with zero point 0.1 goals added per match just from dribbling. He is killing it with his passing. He is killing it with his shots. and he's already scored a couple times. He did have a boneheaded red card against Colorado, but he's still a teenager. The problem is how does he get playing time on this team now that they've signed Carlos Vela, now that they have Cristiano Oliveira, who is an up and coming Uruguay international, which kind of ranks higher than Venezuela on that pecking order. Like this team is just so full of talent that he is not going to get the playing time that he needs to develop. And there is something to develop there. That is undeniable. So I know we were talking before this that maybe we could pitch team like Colorado should try and trade for him next year. They should try and sign him on a loan next year, even if I think the rules state you can only just do a year-long loan for intra-league stuff. But like someone who needs help on the wing needs to get this guy. Try and like keep as much equity as you can when he like lights it up for you. And LAFC, if just like get this done, get this guy playing on a good roster, loan him overseas, do something because he needs to get better fast because he's great.
I think David Martinez is a good shout. I think LAFC just have like a real problem with they've got a lot of good young dudes. Like Nathan Ordaz is another one who like is probably too good for next pro at this point.
And he's also too good for his role on the first team, but everyone above him is better.
Well, this is the thing. His role for the first team is like 30th guy who doesn't play. And so when we're talking about like again, I don't know what the incentive structure is to make it work, but like there should be a way for these guys to play in MLS that is beneficial for all parties because there's not tanking in MLS. So like I don't know what it is, but there needs to be a way to get these guys minutes. But especially in LAFC's case, where like you're right, you're a sick young winger. Sorry, Buanga and Vela and Oliveira and all these guys are just better than you. Like there's not you can't even be like, oh, Steve Cherundolo needs to play the kids more. And it's like, actually, no, he fundamentally does not. They are trying to win now, play the best player every game. So that's a funky one. What do you think about one of the things I think about with Martinez and also with other young wingers is like, especially when they have young small minutes and it's hard to project out, is like how do you project out his like shot getting stuff? Because I think it's much easier to project out the dribbling and the passing because like there's so many more opportunities for it. But like this guy's only played 300, 400 pro minutes. Like that's maybe like 8 shots. Like how do you project that out?
So here's the fun part. He's actually taken 15 shots. So
Come
it's
on.
he's
Great. He's a
yeah, right.
five he's a 5 shot per 90 guy. Okay. Sure.
So here's what I'll say is the highlights where I've seen him score it. Well, his one against New Mexico is kind of from far out, but his highlights for Venezuela are getting on the ball and dribbling dudes and putting it on a dime from distance, whether it's to someone's feet or head or in the corner, or he is fight he's running in behind and getting into the box first and one timing across in. So he is
Wow,
playing
that
high percentage plays.
hold on. Well, except for the kinds of shots he's taking. 15 shots at 0.06 not penalty expected goal shot is absolute gunner behavior. But shot volume, young player shot volume is like a real good predictor of future ability. Harrison,
There's just so many good wingers on this list, right? Like forget about just like what you've already talked about. You have Augustin Ojea over in NYFC. You have Brian Gutierrez. Also, I mean, there's like 3 or 4, and those are just the guys that I have like earmarked as like having positive G plus and being like net positives to their team in their limited minutes, right? There's a lot of people on this list that aren't necessarily net positives just yet from a G plus perspective, and that's okay. I think sometimes we get caught up in being plus or negative, and sometimes it we sit there and say, well, it's not a net win, right? Sometimes you have to just take the small increments and just win that. But there's so many good young wingers in this league.
Being a zero who can stay on the field as an 18-year-old is huge.
Yeah, yeah.
That I imagine would predict success just being break even before the age of
So
20 in MLS.
so if you look at Mike Imbergio and Sam Goldman's Davies model, which is like to me the best public work for projecting out young talent there is, basically the number one predictor for young players is minutes. Like, can you get on the field? If you look at an 18-year-old who plays 2,000 minutes in a decent league, their Davies is usually off the charts because none of the 18-year-olds are playing. And if they're playing, that's a really, really good sign. Um, and I think this is why I bring up the thing about like it's nice that all these players are playing now because I think actually we can legitimately evaluate these players. You can have real thoughts about
It's not
and
just a
I
list of who's playing.
yeah, exactly. So I think that's very, very cool.
Well, and I know that you guys all thought I was going to go with Miami and Kramaski and stuff, who I think is super low on a lot of things. I mean, he's 19 years old, and I think he's going to have a really really good career. But actually, I'm going to pivot, and the guy I want to talk about is Peyton Miller, who's 16 and starting for New England. Obviously they flipped their starting fullback in lieu of his development, and granted, New England's not great, but Miller's 16 right now. He's a net positive right now in 500 minutes for New England. He just has so many good raw tools right now, just from his soccer IQ to physical traits. It's really, really promising. It's fun to see him out there. He's been a really fun going through some of his highlights today. He's somebody that stood out to me.
I I really like playing kid fullbacks because I feel like the risk is comparatively very low. Because like they're fullbacks. Like what's gonna happen? They messed up. They're on the side of the field. Like who cares? So I think like that's a very simplistic way to view it, but I think fullbacks are like probably the position you can be most aggressive
Do
with
you think that
playing
depends
kids.
upon the tactical element of the team? Because some people have that expectation. You look at like Greg Berhalter's like lineup that he was trying to play with, to where the fullback, and a lot of teams utilize that fullback providing cover for like the central defensive midfielder and stuff, right? To where they switch
Yeah,
and stuff
yeah.
like that, to where some of the you have a little bit more complex elements.
Yeah, I think like the way you play will impact that. But I think in general, like as long as you're reasonably organized, like I think it's a fairly safe place to and you see this a lot with like young center backs make their debut at fullback because it's easier or it's safer for them. Regardless, it's exciting to get a 16-year-old on the pitch for 15 or for 500 minutes. And like this is one of the things, at least I've been very critical of the Revs because they've been very directionless for some time. Like this is definitely the right sort of move to make of okay, I still think they shouldn't have moved on to Juan Jones, but like this is good. This is a fine like if you think about it, this is very Caleb Wiley, where like Caleb Wiley came in when Atlanta had like kind of a down year, and then the next year he just is a squad player. And then by the time he's 18, you sell him for $10 million or whatever. So
I mean,
I dig
the real
it.
question though with New England is, what do we do with Caleb Porter? I
Well,
mean,
that's
this
a whole
the whole idea.
we don't have nearly enough time to get into what to do with Caleb Porter.
Yeah, I know. But like the whole idea of having a 16-year-old at fullback is the idea that you're going to develop him in some way. Like what you said with Caleb Wiley, right? There was some development not thrust in there. And Porter just hasn't done a very good job about developing players over the course of his career. He just steadily more and more moves away from them over the
Well,
course of his tenure.
if we're gonna talk about like a young player that is definitely gonna get on a lot of people's votes, it's Esmir Bayraktarovic, who had a peach of an assist in his Bosnia debut, by the way. But he does nothing. And he's been playing for 2 seasons and still does nothing. He doesn't create shots in any volume. He doesn't get shots in any volume. The shots he does get are very below average quality. I don't know, like,
None of the metrics love him. No, they don't even they barely even like him.
and again, we just talked about like he's 18 years old and he already has like 30 pro 90s. That's a good thing. That's objectively a good thing for him long term. But like Caleb Porter just is not, he's not much of a talent nurturer, is he?
No.
I mean, even Noel Buck, like Noel Buck was like, I'm out, guys. Like I'd rather go play for Southampton's U21s on
There,
loan.
there was one talent he nurtured, and his name is Darlington Nagby.
No,
And
he
I
didn't
guess
even know.
he didn't even he didn't even do that.
No.
Wasn't Nags like 24 by the time he got to Portland?
Well, Akron,
Well, he coached him in college.
yeah,
Oh
he
yeah,
was
he
his
had him in
college
Akron.
coach.
Yeah, he had him in
Yeah,
Akron. Yeah, 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 true.
But the
Yeah,
reality,
that's so long ago.
but there's the talk, right, that Nagby really kind of stagnated for a huge portion of his career, especially in Portland, right? To where there was the question of is Nagby ever going to be Nagby, right? The quote unquote great, player because like he was being misconstrued and misplayed and mismanaged for almost the entirety of Porter's tenure. So, not to kind of, I know we've gotten off onto rabbit trail, but like if you want to look at young players under Porter's, vision and insight, like that really, hopefully things turn out better for him than what they have for just about everybody else down the line.
Ben, how much does like early playing time like this for someone like Peyton Miller, like if you're club side, like how much does this matter to you?
to me personally, knowing nothing about any of this actual talking to players or what actually matters, I would like that a lot. Because even if his numbers aren't great, I think that's a sign that it's a personality that they can handle next steps. So they've
It's a
already
mature
handled adversity. They have the maturity. You can work with them on, and you have a better idea of what their game looks like in the pro scene.
uh yeah, that's I mean, I think that's uh there's like a maturity to it,
Mm-hmm.
right? Um my player, and Ben, this is going to be you and me. Harrison had to pop off. My player is like super left wing, and in left wing in that it's a super homer pick. But my player is DeAndre Kerr, and
So
DeAndre Kerr.
as someone who doesn't watch Toronto, what do I need to know about DeAndre Kerr?
So DeAndre Kerr just sneaks in. He turns 22 in November, which is like I think the deadline is October 14th or something. And on the face of it, DeAndre Kerr is like not great. 0.35 non-penalty expected goals plus expected assists, seventh percentile shot creating actions, 25th percentile shots. There's not a lot there, right? However, G plus really likes him because he receives passes in the box and he receives through balls. That's the thing he does really well, is he's a very good off-ball mover. Um, he is unusual in that he has been like quietly quite productive for some terrible Toronto FC teams. Like he's got 11 goals and like 35 90s for truly dreadful teams as a 19, 20-year-old, which is like
That's an
reasonable.
accomplishment. As someone who watched Cole Bassett develop on Anthony Hudson's teams, yes, it's when a youngster can produce in that environment, it means something.
And last year he was like almost up to half an expected goal and assist a game, which again for like a 20-year-old is huge, especially when TFC were as bad as they were. His numbers have taken a little bit of a step back this year. He's missed a lot of time through injury this year. Um, but he is like very much in the archetype of striker I like that like gets lots of good chances, feels somewhat wasteful, but works really hard. I just sort of like him, and he has that like almost Paddy Mullinsy ness of like somehow he just gets the odd good chance every game.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Well,
I think even he
I
missed a
think
decent chance against Colorado, I think as well.
but he's there in the first. Well, this all comes back to the what I think of as the founding parable or poem of what inspired G Plus in the first place. That it's pinned to the top of the player value channel, and it's roses are red, violets are blue. Wanda is lucky and receiving has no inherent value. And what this shows is if you are not in the position to take the chances, it doesn't matter if you can hit them. So the fact that he is generating receiving numbers, the fact that Cabral does nothing but get in dangerous positions, and yet we are now struggling offensively without him. It shows that you just to get the ball forward, just to be an off-ball mover, just to stretch the defense and then expose those gaps for your players to run into. Even if you're not great at passing, you just have to be average to get value from that. So I think that tracks well for someone who is going to be at least a very good forward in this league for the rest of their career.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I would go as far as to say like he will be
Very
very
good.
good, but like he'll
Mm-hmm.
hang around. Like I would be
Mm-hmm.
surprised if he was in the CPL in 5 years.
He's
You know
got
what
a
I mean?
couple more MLS stops in him at the very least.
Yeah, like for sure. If I think his contract is in an option year this year, I think if TFC were like, we don't want you, he would get an MLS deal somewhere else for sure. For sure. And maybe that's not the like standard for 22 under 22, but like I'm quite bullish on him. But I was also quite bullish on Noble Okello, who plays for Atlanta too now. So swings and roundabouts. Already we're gonna call our 22 under 22 section there. I'm very curious to see the finalist. I feel like every year I hate who gets number one because it ends up being like Alan Velasco or something for no reason. But we'll see this year. The names, I think it's a lot harder to mess up. Like Diego
Mm-hmm.
Gomez and Diego Luna feel like the two unanimous top two.
Yeah.
And then like whatever Miami Harrison was going to talk about Redondo and Cramashi as well. And like it's pretty hard to go wrong with either of those guys. And it's a very
Yeah.
strong
There's
U22
a
class.
strong peloton of candidates for that age group now.
I feel like since so like the league announced the change to the salary cap where you can go with four U22 players and get more TAM, get more money. I feel like it's a pretty decent group of U22s this year for like a roster designation that has not generally been very good.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, maybe we should dig into that a little bit
Yeah,
deeper.
that's something to think about, I think.
Ben, do you have a G plus draft update?
I do, and I have very bad news for you, my friend.
No. Have I fallen further?
You haven't fallen further, but so just to set the stage for
I
our
thought
listeners.
Daniel was going to drag me back in with his
Well,
triumphant performances for
Daniel's gone
saying,
from -3 to -1.5, so he's helping. I
yes.
might that might be all of the G plus you've gained actually, because you started the League's Cup break at about 6, a little over 6, and you're
No,
now at 7.25.
no, it's all him.
I mean, you've lost three of your people are gone. Bupenza's gone, and Reynoso's gone,
That's true.
Almada's gone.
That's true. I did.
So
I am playing with multiple red cards here, and Daniel missed the entire season.
yeah, so you had some pretty bad luck with your draft. So then
Ben,
Harrison ended right before the League's Cup around 9. He's gotten up to 13.5
oh my God.
to go. I started, well, the week before League's Cup started, I was at 10. Then League's Cup started and I was at 15, and I'm now at
What?
19.
What?
And if you go to the player breakdown, I have the top three people of everyone we picked, which is
Who?
Pooj at 6.9,
Oh my God.
Berkey at 6.3,
Oh my God.
and Cucho at 5.4.
Oh my goodness.
And then you've got
Kuja.
Christian Benteke.
And I've got Benteke. I always believe in the Benteke.
So I think it's pretty much over now. I think we can
Hey,
call it.
there's four match weeks left. You never know. Daniel has like four blinders,
I mean,
and
San Jose
Benteke.
might give up 20 XG in shots in the next month, so he's got a
Well,
chance.
you know what'll fix that? Hiring Bruce Arena as your director of soccer. That'll do it. Alrighty, that's all from us today. We'll be back in 2 weeks. I don't know. I don't know what our schedule is going to be like because it's going to be weird. We're gonna get some stuff in before the playoffs. That's for sure. Um, if you're enjoying the
Definitely.
pods, if you're enjoying everything on the website, I hear there is an article in the pipeline that might be coming across my editor desk this week. Um, but we've been playing around with some stuff. So we'll see if those come out shortly. And again, if you want to play around with the playoff simulation stuff, the best way to do so is to join the patron only Discord. It's one tier, $5 a month. It covers server costs for the site, and that's why the site is ad free. And that's why it's free, and we don't do anything crazy. NWSL is also coming to a playoff head. Expected own goals crew there, dropping pods. They talked about Kansas City uh, stonking Washington Spirit 3-0 this week, I think. Bay FC are sneaking in at the back half of the playoffs. They might do it. But it's a lot of fun over there as well. Anyways, that's all from us. And as always, enjoy the soccer.